蜘蛛の糸, the spider's thread. Once upon a time, Buddha was taking a stroll alone along the edge of the lotus pond in paradise. All the lotus flowers blooming in the pond were as white as pearls, and an indescribably lovely scent coming from their golden stamens endlessly filled the air. It was perhaps early morning in paradise. Before long, Buddha paused at the edge of the pond, and from between the leaves of the lotus flowers covering the water's surface, he saw the scene below. Below the lotus pond of paradise was the bottom of hell. The river of death and the mountain of needles could be seen clearly through the crystal-like water, like looking through a waterscope. Thereupon, amidst the other sinners, the writhing form of a man caught Buddha's eye. This man, named Khandata, was a great thief who had committed many terrible crimes, such as killing people and setting houses on fire. Yet, even he had once done a good deed. One day, as he was passing through a thick forest, he saw a small spider crawling by the road. Khandata immediately raised his foot to step on it, but he suddenly changed his mind. No, even though it's small, it must have a life. How pitiful it would be to recklessly take that life, he said to himself. So finally, he helped the spider without killing it. As Buddha looked upon this scene in hell, he remembered the time Khandata had saved the spider. He thought that, if he could, he should save this man from hell as a reward for his good deed. Fortunately, beside him, a spider of paradise was spinning its silvery thread on a jade-colored lotus leaf. Buddha gently took the spider's thread in his hand and lowered it straight down between the pearl-like white lotuses towards hell, far below. At the bottom of hell was the pond of blood, and Khandata was in it trying to stay afloat amongst all the other sinners. No matter where you looked, it was completely dark, except for the faint glimmer that occasionally came from the terrifying mountain of needles. There was nothing else but hopelessness and despair. The whole place was as deathly silent as a graveyard. The only sound that could be heard was the occasional faint sigh of the sinners. Perhaps the humans who had fallen so deep into hell had suffered through so much torture that they had no strength left for crying. Even the great thief Khandata could only writhe like a dying frog as he was choked by the pond of blood. One day, Khandata happened to raise his head. As he gazed out into the silent darkness of the sky above the pond of blood, he saw the silver spider's thread descending above him, smoothly in a single, shimmering line, coming from the distant heavens as if it was afraid of being seen. As soon as Khandata saw this, he clapped his hands joyfully. If he could cling on to this thread and climb high enough, surely he could escape from hell. And why stop there? If everything went smoothly, he might even be able to reach paradise. Then he would no longer be chased up the mountain of needles or drowned in the pond of blood. Thinking this, Kandata immediately grasped the spider's thread firmly with both hands and started climbing it higher and higher with all his might. As he was originally a great thief, he had experience with this sort of thing. Because so many thousands of miles separate hell and paradise, the ascent was not easy, no matter how fervently he climbed. After having climbed for a while, Kandata eventually grew tired and was unable to climb any further. He had no choice, so he paused to rest. As he dangled from the thread, he looked into the depths below. Climbing so hard had been worth it, because the pond of blood, where he had been not moments before, had now disappeared into the darkness below. Even the faint glimmering of the terrifying mountain of needles was below him. If he kept climbing at this rate, escaping from hell might be easier than he expected. Kandata wound the spider's thread around his hands, and with a voice he had not used in many years since coming here, he laughed and said, "All right, all right." However, he suddenly noticed an innumerable number of sinners scrambling up the spider's thread after him like a line of ants, climbing higher and higher toward him unyieldingly. When Kandata saw this, he was dumbstruck with surprise and fear for a moment, watching the scene below him, his mouth hanging open like a fool. The thin spider's thread seemed like it was about to give out, even with just him hanging on it. So how could it bear the weight of so many people? If it did break on his way up, he would plunge straight back into hell, even though he had taken great pains to climb to where he was now. As he thought about how terrible that would be, the line of hundreds and thousands of sinners was diligently climbing up the thin, shining spider's thread from the dark depths of the pond of blood below. If he did not somehow stop them now, the thread would break in two in the middle, and there was no doubt that he would fall. With a loud voice, Kandata shouted, "Hey, all you sinners! This spider's thread is mine. Who said you could climb up? Get off! Get off!" It was at that moment that the spider's thread, which had shown no signs of breaking before then, suddenly snapped right where Kandata was hanging on. Even Kandata was left behind with no hope of ever escaping. Without even having time to scream, he spun around like a top, cutting through the air, plunging head first into the darkness below. Afterwards, the only thing left hanging in the moonless and starless sky was the glimmering of the thin spider's thread from paradise. Buddha was standing at the edge of the lotus pond in paradise, steadily watching the events unfold from beginning to end. Before long, he saw Kandata sink like a stone in the pond of blood. He made a sad expression and resumed his strolling once again. For trying to escape from hell, Kandata had received the divine punishment of falling back down into hell, befitting his merciless heart. Seeing this, Buddha must have thought him a shameful creature. However, the lotus flowers of the lotus pond of paradise were not at all concerned about these events. These pearl-white flowers swayed gently around the feet of Buddha, and an indescribably lovely fragrance from their stamens filled the air. By then, it was perhaps nearing noon in paradise.